former Senior Chief Petty Officer Garrett Stone had been paralyzed from the waist down for 19 months following a catastrophic helicopter crash during a routine training exercise at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. The crash killed both pilots and left Garrett as the sole survivor with a completely severed spinal cord at the L1 vertebra, complete paraplegia, with absolutely no possibility of neurological recovery, according to multiple specialists at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. At 38 years old, the Navy medically retired him with full honors, a wheelchair he was still learning to navigate with consistent competence, and survivor's guilt that manifested as clinical depression, so severe his VA therapist had warned explicitly that he met high-risk criteria for suicide. PTSD and depression affected veterans with spinal cord injuries at significantly elevated rates compared to non-disabled veterans, with paraplegia predicting more severe PTSD symptoms than other injury categories. Research showed that category of injury was the most consistent predictor of PTSD diagnosis and symptom severity, paralysis creating compounded trauma from both the initial event and the permanent physical consequences. Garrett existed rather than lived in a ground-floor apartment in Virginia Beach, mechanically going through prescribed motions, physical therapy sessions he completed without emotional engagement, disability payments that felt like financial compensation for catastrophic failure, and days that blurred together indistinguishably because nothing mattered when you'd permanently lost the physical identity you'd spent 15 years building. PTSD symptoms in veterans commonly included negative thoughts about oneself, ongoing emotions of fear and guilt, feeling detached from others, loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities, and profound difficulty experiencing positive emotions. Garrett embodied all documented symptoms with devastating completeness. What made Garrett's isolation psychologically complete was the painful absence of his K-9 partner, Ajax, a 7-year-old German shepherd who'd served with Garrett for 3 deployments spanning Iraq and Afghanistan. Ajax hadn't been in the helicopter during the crash. He was stateside at the time, recovering from routine knee surgery. When Garrett was evacuated to Walter Reed for emergency spinal surgery and months of inpatient rehabilitation, Ajax remained in the military working dog program awaiting handler assignment. The Navy offered to facilitate adoption once Garrett was medically stable, but Garrett refused with finality. "I'm in a wheelchair," he told the handler coordinator with barely controlled emotion. "I can't take care of a dog anymore. I can barely take care of myself. Find Ajax another handler who can actually run with him and work with him properly." It was the most emotionally painful decision of Garrett's life, choosing to deliberately abandon his partner because his broken body made him believe he had nothing left to offer any living being. For 19 months, Garrett had existed in a state of functional depression that met clinical criteria for major depressive disorder. Completing required physical therapy exercises because the VA mandated attendance, eating minimal nutrition because his body demanded fuel, breathing because stopping required more active effort than continuing. His apartment walls remained completely blank. No photographs from his SEAL career, no deployment memories, nothing that reminded him of who he was before gravity and mechanical failure conspired to end everything he'd worked toward. His VA therapist had been consistently pushing him toward reintegration activities, volunteer work, veteran support groups, adaptive sports programs, anything to counter the isolation that increased suicide risk. Garrett had declined every single suggestion until Dr. Sarah Chen, His physical therapist, who'd worked with him since Walter Reed, made an offer he couldn't easily refuse. Virginia Beach Animal Rescue needs volunteers to socialize dogs, she said during a routine therapy session. 30 minutes maximum. You sit in a room. Dogs come to you. You pet them. That's literally it. No physical demands beyond sitting. Just presence. Garrett tried to decline with his standard excuse about being useless, but Dr. Chen added the detail that broke through his resistance. They sometimes have military working dogs, ones that didn't successfully complete training or got injured and can't work. They're extremely difficult to place because they're too intense for regular families. You'd understand them. Maybe they'd understand you. The implication was clear and deliberate. There were dogs out there as psychologically broken as Garrett felt physically broken, and maybe mutual brokenness was sufficient foundation for meaningful connection. Against his better judgment, driven by curiosity he hadn't experienced in months and the persistent ghost of Ajax's absence, Garrett agreed to visit once. Just once. On a humid Saturday afternoon, when Virginia Beach heat made his wheelchair uncomfortable, Dr. Chen drove him to Virginia Beach Animal Rescue, helped him navigate his wheelchair through the entrance with practiced efficiency, and introduced him to shelter director Maria Rodriguez. Maria explained the volunteer program with practiced patience. We bring dogs to you in our meet and greet room. If you connect with one, that's wonderful. If not, absolutely no pressure. These are dogs that need patience more than anything else. Garrett sat in the small room feeling ridiculous. A paralyzed seal who couldn't walk, couldn't run, couldn't conduct operations, attempting to help animals by simply existing near them. The first 3 dogs they brought were gentle, well-socialized pets seeking homes. A Labrador mix with a graying muzzle, a senior beagle with soulful eyes, a young pit bull with enthusiastic energy. All were undeniably sweet. None registered with Garrett beyond mechanical observation. Then Maria returned with an explicit warning. This next dog is extremely challenging. He's a failed MWD candidate, Belgian Malinois, 4 years old, washed out of training for severe aggression issues. He's been here for 7 months. Nobody can get near him safely. He's scheduled for euthanasia in 2 weeks because we absolutely cannot place him. But I thought, maybe someone who knows what military dogs are like might see something we're missing. His name is Reaper. When shelter staff brought Reaper into the room, Garrett understood immediately why the Belgian Malinois had failed MWD training and why no adopters could handle him. Reaper entered on a controlled lead held by 2 handlers wearing protective equipment. Body rigid with barely controlled aggression, teeth bared in warning display, pulling against restraint with focused intensity. His eyes scanned the room with tactical precision, assessing threats, calculating angles of approach, exhibiting hypervigilance that looked exactly like combat PTSD in human form. This dog wasn't aggressive because he was inherently mean or poorly bred. He was aggressive because he was terrified, and terror in a 75-pound Belgian Malinois with bite training manifested as controlled violence toward anything that moved. The handlers released Reaper's lead quickly and exited immediately, closing the door. The Belgian Malinois immediately moved to the corner farthest from Garrett, defensive positioning, maintaining maximum distance, growling low and continuous. Maria's voice came through an observation window intercom. Don't approach him, just sit. Let him assess you. 5 minutes, then we'll retrieve him safely. Garrett sat motionless in his wheelchair, hands visible and non-threatening, making absolutely no sudden movements. He recognized this behavior intimately. He'd seen it in operators with severe combat trauma exhibiting hypervigilance, defensive aggression, and complete inability to trust anything, because trust previously got them catastrophically hurt. Garrett spoke quietly, not to command, but to communicate recognition. "Yeah, buddy, I understand. Everything feels like a threat. You're in a room with someone you don't know, can't escape, and your body is screaming at you to fight or die. I get it. I feel that way every single time I wake up and remember my legs don't work anymore." The words weren't calculated training technique. They were simply truth. Garrett continued, voice low and steady. "They say you're aggressive, probably because you learned that aggression keeps you safer than trusting people who hurt you before. That's a fair tactical assessment. But here's the thing. I literally cannot hurt you, even if I wanted to. See this wheelchair? I'm not walking. Over there. I'm not reaching for you. I'm just here. Broken like you." What happened next shocked everyone watching through the observation window. Reaper stopped growling completely. The Belgian Malinois' body language shifted dramatically from defensive aggression to something entirely different: assessment, curiosity, confusion. Reaper took 3 cautious steps toward Garrett, then 3 more. Then he was standing 5 feet away, head tilted, studying this human who wasn't threatening him, wasn't demanding anything, wasn't attempting to force interaction. Garrett extended one hand slowly, palm down, non-threatening, at wheelchair level. "Completely up to you," he said quietly. "Come say hello or don't. I'm not going anywhere. Literally can't." Reaper approached slowly, sniffed Garrett's extended hand carefully, and did something Maria later said she'd never witnessed in 7 months. The Belgian Malinois lay down at Garrett's wheelchair wheels, placed his head on his paws, and closed his eyes. Not sleep, but genuine rest. Submission without fear. Trust without force. 2 broken warriors recognizing each other across the gap between species. Maria entered the room slowly and carefully, expecting Reaper to react with his typical aggression toward movement. The Belgian Malinois raised his head, but didn't move from his position at Garrett's wheelchair. "I've literally never seen him calm before in 7 months, Maria whispered with genuine awe. "What did you do?" Garrett's answer was simple and honest. "Nothing special. I just told him I understood what it feels like when everything is threatening and your body won't cooperate." Maria made an offer that would fundamentally change everything. "He's scheduled for euthanasia in exactly 2 weeks. Nobody will adopt him. He's far too reactive, too dangerous for families with children. But if you wanted to, you could foster him. Give him somewhere to go besides being put down." Garrett's first instinct was immediate refusal. "I can't take care of a dog. I'm in a wheelchair. I can barely manage my own apartment independently." But Maria countered with logic Garrett couldn't easily dismiss. "You got him completely calm in 5 minutes when 7 months of professional training by experienced handlers couldn't. Maybe you don't need to train him using traditional methods. Maybe you just need to exist near him so he learns the world isn't entirely composed of threats." The logic was tactically sound, but Garrett knew the real reason he was hesitating. Bringing Reaper home meant acknowledging he could still contribute something meaningful, even from a wheelchair, and acknowledging capability meant confronting the guilt he'd used to justify his isolation. Dr. Chen, who'd been watching through the observation window, added the detail that broke Garrett's remaining resistance. Reaper washed out of MWD training because he exhibited severe aggressive reactivity after being attacked by another dog during early socialization exercises. He learned the world is fundamentally dangerous, so he became dangerous first as protective mechanism. That's not a training failure, that's trauma response. You intimately understand trauma response. Maybe that's exactly what he needs. Someone who understands that aggression is sometimes just fear wearing armor. Garrett looked down at Reaper, still resting beside his wheelchair. The Belgian Malinois looked back with eyes that held the same exhaustion Garrett saw in his mirror daily. 1 month trial, Garrett finally said. If he's aggressive toward me or I genuinely can't handle it, he comes back immediately. No judgment on either of us. Maria agreed instantly, profoundly relieved to avoid euthanizing a dog she believed deserved better than what his trauma had given him. Bringing Reaper home transformed Garrett's existence in ways he didn't anticipate. The Belgian Malinois was intensely reactive to environmental sounds, barking aggressively at neighbors, lunging at the window when people passed, exhibiting hypervigilance that physically exhausted him. But Reaper never showed any aggression toward Garrett. Instead, the dog positioned himself protectively near the wheelchair, lying beside it during meals, following it from room to room, maintaining defensive proximity that communicated, "I'll guard you while you're vulnerable." Garrett recognized the behavior immediately from his SEAL experience. Reaper was treating him like a wounded teammate who required protection. The dog's aggression wasn't about violence. It was about protecting someone he decided mattered. Garrett began working with Reaper using techniques he'd learned handling Ajax, calm commands, absolutely consistent routines, rewarding calm behavior rather than punishing reactive behavior. Progress was slow and non-linear. Reaper still barked at strangers, still exhibited defensive aggression when surprised. But with Garrett, the Belgian Malinois was fundamentally different. Gentle, patient, almost therapeutic in his constant presence. 3 weeks into fostering, something shifted dramatically. Garrett's wheelchair got stuck in a threshold between rooms, a minor mechanical issue he could usually resolve with upper body strength. But this time, fatigue and poor angle meant he couldn't generate enough force, and he realized he was trapped, unable to reach his phone to call for help. Panic began setting in. The feeling of helplessness that had been his constant companion since the crash. That's when Reaper did something unexpected and untrained. The Belgian Malinois grabbed the wheelchair handle in his jaws, gently, carefully, and pulled. The chair shifted slightly. Reaper adjusted his position and pulled again with more force. After 3 coordinated attempts, the chair cleared the threshold. Garrett sat stunned. Reaper wasn't trained for mobility assistance. The dog had simply recognized a problem and solved it. Over the following weeks, Reaper began exhibiting more assistance behaviors without any formal training, retrieving dropped items before Garrett asked, alerting to doorbells, positioning himself as a brace when Garrett transferred from wheelchair to bed. It was as if the Belgian Malinois was systematically figuring out Garrett's limitations and compensating for them, not from training, but from partnership. The turning point came when Garrett received an unexpected call from the VA's handler coordinator. Ajax, his former K-9 partner, had been retired from active MWD service due to advancing arthritis affecting his operational capability. The coordinator asked if Garrett wanted to reconsider adoption. Ajax hasn't successfully bonded with his new handler, the coordinator explained carefully. He's functionally competent, but not thriving emotionally. We genuinely think he remembers you. Would you consider taking him? Garrett's first reaction was the same guilt that made him refuse 19 months ago. I'm paralyzed. I can't give Ajax what he needs: runs, operational work, physical activity. But then he looked at Reaper, the supposedly aggressive dog everyone had wanted to euthanize, who was lying beside the wheelchair, providing companionship Garrett didn't know he desperately needed. The coordinator added persuasively, "Sir, Ajax is 9 years old with chronic arthritis. He doesn't need someone who can run marathons with him. He needs someone who understands him completely. You're that person." Garrett made a decision that terrified him. "Bring Ajax for a visit. Let me see how he reacts to me in this wheelchair. And I have another dog now, Reaper. They'll need to meet before any decisions." The meeting was arranged for the following week at Garrett's apartment. When Ajax arrived, led by his current handler, the German Shepherd's reaction shocked everyone present. Ajax pulled free from the handler, moved directly to Garrett's wheelchair, and lay down with his head on Garrett's lap, the exact same position he'd held countless times during deployments when Garrett needed comfort after difficult missions. The handler was genuinely stunned. "He hasn't done that protective behavior with anyone since you left Walter Reed. We thought he'd forgotten you completely." But Garrett knew better. Ajax hadn't forgotten. The German Shepherd had simply waited patiently for his operator to come back. The critical test was Ajax meeting Reaper. Everyone expected the supposedly aggressive Belgian Malinois to react defensively to the newcomer on his territory. Instead, Reaper approached cautiously, sniffed Ajax carefully, and did something that left Maria speechless when she heard about it later. Reaper lay down beside Ajax in coordinated formation, both dogs flanking Garrett's wheelchair in protective positioning. Like a two-dog security detail guarding a wounded operator, Garrett adopted both dogs. The VA helped facilitate Ajax's official adoption through military working dog retirement protocols, and Maria finalized Reaper's adoption paperwork, noting that Garrett was the only person who'd ever successfully managed the Belgian Malinois' severe reactivity. Over the following months, Garrett discovered something profound. The dogs weren't rehabilitation projects he was fixing through training. They were partners compensating for his paralysis while he simultaneously compensated for their trauma. 6 months after bringing Reaper home, Garrett's apartment was visibly transformed. Walls that had remained blank for 19 months now displayed photographs from his SEAL career, not as painful reminders of what he'd lost, but as tangible evidence of who he was and remained. Ajax and Reaper maintained coordinated, protective positions around Garrett's wheelchair throughout each day, both dogs alert but calm in ways that suggested mutual understanding. Garrett had started volunteering regularly at Virginia Beach Animal Rescue, working specifically with reactive and aggressive dogs that needed someone who understood trauma response rather than just training techniques. His methods were deliberately unorthodox. He didn't force interaction or use dominance-based training. He simply existed in spaces with damaged dogs, speaking quietly about his paralysis, his survivor's guilt, his understanding that aggression was often fear disguised as strength. Dogs that shelter staff couldn't successfully socialize began showing measurable progress with Garrett, not because he trained them using traditional methods, but because he related to them with genuine understanding. "I can't walk," he told a reactive pit bull during one session. "You can't trust humans after what they did to you. We're both dealing with bodies and minds that don't work the way they're supposed to. But here we are, still trying." Garrett also began working with the VA's adaptive sports program, using his wheelchair experience to mentor recently injured veterans struggling with mobility loss and identity crisis. Ajax and Reaper accompanied him to all sessions, their presence demonstrating that partnership didn't require perfect bodies, just mutual understanding across disability and trauma. One veteran, recently paralyzed from an IED injury in Afghanistan, asked Garrett the question everyone eventually asked: "How do you not completely give up when you can't do any of the things that made you who you were?" Garrett's answer, refined over months of learning to live rather than merely exist, became his standard response. "I did give up. For 19 months, I existed, but didn't live. Then I met a dog everyone said was too aggressive to save. He wasn't aggressive. He was scared and defending himself the only way he knew how. I understood that completely. And understanding him taught me something crucial. Being broken doesn't make you worthless. It just means you're honest about damage others pretend doesn't exist." Ajax came back to me, even though I'm paralyzed. Reaper trusted me, even though humans hurt him before. If they can see past brokenness to something worth protecting, maybe I can too. 1 year after visiting the shelter, Garrett and Reaper participated in a national service dog demonstration, showing how reactive dogs with trauma histories could be rehabilitated through patience and understanding rather than force and dominance. Reaper, the Belgian Malinois scheduled for euthanasia for aggression, performed controlled obedience sequences and demonstrated sophisticated mobility assistance behaviors he taught himself through observation. When judges asked how Garrett trained such a reactive dog with severe aggression issues, his answer shocked the audience and went viral on veteran social media. "I didn't train him using traditional methods. I just stopped pretending I wasn't as scared and damaged as he was. Reaper was aggressive because aggression kept him safe when trust got him hurt. I was isolated because isolation kept me safe when vulnerability made me remember I'm paralyzed." We didn't fix each other through training protocols. We just decided being broken together was better than being broken alone. Everything else, the assistance work, the socialization, the progress, that just happened organically because neither of us had to pretend anymore. 2 years after the shelter visit, Garrett had become a recognized expert in rehabilitating reactive military working dogs, partnering with organizations that placed failed MWD candidates with disabled veterans who understood trauma intimately. Ajax and Reaper, both aging now with Ajax at 11 and Reaper at 6, remained his constant companions, living proof that worth isn't measured by physical capability but by willingness to understand pain, fear, and the courage required to trust after trauma teaches you not to. Garrett also began speaking at VA events about suicide prevention, using his own story of 19 months of suicidal ideation followed by recovery through unexpected connection. "I was high risk for suicide," he told one audience of veterans. "My therapist documented it. I felt it every day. The only reason I didn't follow through was inertia. Suicide required more active effort than continuing to exist. Then I met a dog who was going to be euthanized for being too aggressive. We recognized each other across species and disability. That recognition didn't cure my depression or heal my paralysis, but it reminded me that warriors don't stop being warriors when their bodies break. We just find different battles worth fighting. 3 years after the initial shelter visit, Garrett co-founded a non-profit called Broken Together, pairing paralyzed veterans with reactive MBUD candidates, creating partnerships where mutual damage became foundation for healing. The organization's mission statement, written by Garrett, reflected his philosophy. Perfect bodies aren't required for meaningful partnership. Perfect understanding is. We pair veterans whose bodies broke with dogs, whose trust broke. Together, they prove that brokenness doesn't mean worthless. It just means honest. On the 4th anniversary of meeting Reaper, Garrett and both dogs participated in a documentary about military working dog rehabilitation. The filmmaker asked the question that captured everything. What did the aggressive K-9 do next that shocked everyone? Garrett's answer became the documentary's closing scene. Reaper lay down beside my wheelchair and chose to trust me when every experience taught him humans were dangerous. That choice, to trust despite trauma, shocked everyone watching, because we expect broken things to stay broken. We expect aggression to be permanent. We expect paralysis to mean useless. Reaper proved that brokenness is just a starting point, not a destination. Ajax came back to me, proving that loyalty doesn't require perfect bodies. Together, they taught me the most important lesson. Warriors don't stop being warriors when their bodies break or their minds carry trauma. They just find different ways to serve, different partners who need them, and different battles where presence matters more than perfection. The paralyzed SEAL, who believed his wheelchair made him worthless, discovered that the most important missions don't require legs. They require presence, patience, and willingness to recognize yourself in another creature's fear and say, "Me too, and that's okay. Let's be broken together until we figure out what comes next." What the aggressive Belgian Malinois did next didn't just shock the shelter staff. It shocked Garrett into remembering that warriors don't stop being warriors when their bodies catastrophically break. They just find different battles worth fighting, different partners worth protecting, and different ways to prove that loyalty, understanding, and partnership don't require perfect mobility, just perfect recognition across the distance between broken and whole.